Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Seyi. I am creative director for brand, specifically art director. I like the title of art director because it's like very loose and like an art director in you're hearing like interruptions, right? Like radio. It's pretty bad, but yeah. Yeah. The title of an art director is very loose. So loose in the sense that an art director for like an art director that works is different from an art director that works at a brand agency, right? Because like the art is contextual, right? So art director brand most frequently, also art director when it comes to like type design more recently. Yeah, so 3D artists, type designer. These are some of the things I've worked on with my team at that design studio when I was creative director there and executive art director at some point. And there's also some work that we did with Paystack, Coffee Club, Rise, Bundle, um, and um, yeah, and most recently with Afrotype, which is a foundry I created or started last year. Well, officially launched last year, but prior to last year, I had been toying with the idea even while running the studio, right? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah. So that's TAC. I should have like motion graphics of down for here, but that's TAC. So TAC is I'll explain TAC later, but yeah. So this is like a slide containing like um, mock-ups of TAC and Danfo. This is we went to Oshodi. I forget the bus stop, but went to the bus stop. We hired a lettering artist. We wanted to do some on-field work. So on-field means we initially, like, designers, like sometimes you're lazy and like you're just sitting in your studio thinking you figure everything out. So we started like drawing down for, and then we realized that there are some like very tiny nuances that's specific to um, how the letters are cut. So we had to like hire a lettering artist and actually watch him cut so we could get like all those tiny details, right? This is Danfo, tack, Danfo. The asterisk earring that I'm yet to make, but I'll make at some point in my life. Um, Packaging with Danfo, travel tags. Okay, so how to design a typeface slash font. So what is a typeface? People often confuse typeface and font. A font is, I should actually start with typeface. Typeface is a group of letters with uniform structure. So like when you look at the H, and it's like siblings, like your brother, your sister, you guys have like features that look alike, but you're different, right? So like that's like a good analogy for typefaces. A font, on the other hand, mechanism of delivery. So when I say mechanism of delivery, I mean a font is very specific to the time that we're in or the time that you're in. So a font in the 1960s was metal type. So you guys know what metal type is? So you guys know, you know what leading is? Leading. So when you have like a line of text and you have another line of text, the space between those two lines is called leading. People call it leading, but it's actually leading. And leading is named after lead. That's because the letters used to come in blocks of lead, and the letters were like stamps. So the letter would be a letter, and then space on top of the letter, space below the letter, and that block of letter, right, was what like inspired the name leading. And the space, because the letters used to come with space under and space on top, right? So like that's Wayosha, they've managed to get the name out of that. So the font is the mechanism of delivery. So a font in 2024, that's OTFs, that's TTFs, That's WOFF for web. That's variable type, because that's the format now. 100 years from now, the definition of font might change, right? Okay, cool. Are you guys with me? Mad. Okay, cool. So type design is incredibly broad. I was so ignorant. Like I was like, I'm just going to like take photos and like draw and like open the software Glyphs app, right? And just start making letters, right? But like it's incredibly broad. Like there's history, there's very well documented history. There is context, there is the future, there is there are many different aspects. There is the drawing of type. There is there are different types of typefaces, different types of fonts. Like it's incredibly wide and deep. So I'm going to try and cover the wide. And if you guys find it interesting enough, I hope that you guys go like find the things in the wide that are interesting to you, and so you can read deeper. Right. So I'm just going to speak as broadly as I can about type design. Right. And then you guys can pick what interests you and like dig down. So type design can be split into four broad like stages. So concept, design, digitization, and post-production, right? So for concept, what do you guys want to see in the world? Like, that's a very broad question, but like, there really isn't like, you can make type out of anything, right? Like, it's not, you don't have to be like super guarded or super like limited to like the type design you see, right? It can be incredibly broad, it can be incredibly playful, and it can be very technical. But it's basically, you have an idea for type and then you make type, right? Like, it's not that straightforward, but like that should be how you should think about it, at least in the beginning, right? Right, so many type designers start exploring interesting forms of or ideas that they have when the catalog, and then and then when the catalog is formed, they know like what their niche is, right? So so I'm going to show you a few foundries or a few people that make type and like what their niches are. So this is Dynamo. So you guys know Dynamo? You guys know Dynamo? No, you don't know Dynamo. Okay, so Dynamo, I forget if they are French or...
I should get you an headset.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Is this better? This is worse. At all. This is worse. I should continue without...
No, yeah, the first one.
Try this one.
This is better, okay? Now everybody can hear me. Okay, cool. Can I just use this mic? Can I use the speaker of the location? Is that okay? Okay, so hello? Switch me off. Okay, cool. Dynamo is I forget if they're French or German, right? But they love playing with technology with regards type. So when I say technology, I mean they have like this entire website that's just tooling. So like you can test fonts on the websites, you can play around with type on the web. Like this is like this is what they bring to the type world. They're very obsessed with type and technology, right? So they recently, do you guys know Spotify, right? So Spotify recently like updated their typeface and they designed it. It's called Spotify Mix, right? And it's variable because Dynamo, they like to flex. They have the skill set, so just go ahead and they do it. This is Dynamo Darkroom. So Dynamo Darkroom is the website I spoke about earlier. If you visit Dynamo Darkroom, you're going to be able to test, you upload your fonts, you can test it out. There are like various ways to like mix motion with like your type, like it's fun, right? And they design type, but they also do a lot of engineering and like code, because they're really good. This is Ono Type Co. So Ono Type Co, I don't know if you guys know Ono Type Co, but like they're super into like bulbous typography, very expressive, very playful. Like if you ever imagined what Teletubbies would look like as a font, they'll probably be the ones to make that, or what marshmallows look like, or yeah. So you can just tell from like their type, like super big on swashes, on flourishes, on weird round soft forms. Commercial type. Commercial type is their name is commercial type for a reason. They know how to like make type that is effective for corporate communications. So like they usually work with like really, really big brands, and in some way they kind of dictate what type in branding feels like, just because of how powerful they are. And they're like, they've been around for a long time, for many decades. So that's the work they did for Chobani. You guys know like how Chobani broke like the branding internet when it dropped, and type was a very big part of the rebrand. Commercial type design, Chobani Serif. And then that's Museum of Modern Arts. So these guys have rebranded a couple of times, but I think this was the work they did with Order Design, and I think it was Order. I'm not sure. But yeah, they designed MoMA Sans, and MoMA Sans is incredible. Like I've actually been to that museum, and type really does like play like a huge role, right? And it's a really, really well done project. And then there's Afro type, because I had to chook my own hustle inside. And right now we just have two typefaces, so TAC and Danfo. So just me by myself built Danfo in 2018. I hacked it. I downloaded FontLab. I cracked FontLab because I could not afford the license. I didn't even care. I just wanted to build it. It was uTorrent or something. I don't know. I sure got it. And I built a first version. It was just letters, no punctuation, just A to Z, with shadows, which was like an incredibly difficult thing to do. But like I like a challenge. Yeah, and that was the first iteration. The second iteration, which is one that dropped. Was it earlier this year or last year? My memory fails me. This year, right? Is more robust. No shadows, but numbers, accented letters, punctuation. Is much more robust. Like it's a full set, right? Yeah. Okay, so this is TAC. So you guys know First TAC 77? Do you guys know First TAC 77 because of this project? Or like did this project make you go do some research? Okay, cool. That was kind of like my aim to a certain extent. First TAC 77 was huge. There's like this whole like there's this whole angle of the story where like they say Obasanjo like used it to like launder like several hundreds of millions of dollars. But separate from that bad rep, right? Festac housed almost 20,000 people in Festac. The actual Festac you know now. The actual Festac you know now was built to house about 17,000 people from all over the world. So they came and they basically had like a what's like the biggest music festival you guys know now, Afro Nation or whatever, right? So it's like Afro Nation but like on steroids, but like for culture, not just like music, right? So like Brazilians were here, Americans were here, people from Africa, Black Americans. It meant different things for different people. For the Black Americans, it meant like coming to the motherland. It was very like emotional for them. For Africans, it signaled like it meant like Africans coming together. So like it meant different things to different people, right? But what's fascinating about TAC and First TAC and what really attracted me to it was, if you look at First TAC in the context of like Nigeria now, it reminds us of a time where we took like a very difficult like challenge and we actually like we nailed it. Like they built National Theatre because of it. The National Stadium was full to the brim with people. We had performances. Fela hated Festac and was doing his own parties in the shrine. And people were torn between going to Festac and going to the shrine because it was a big deal at the time, or he just blew. And like, you know, we have like buildings that people still live in now. The conditions are horrible, but like you can imagine like erecting all of those buildings, figuring out the logistics of getting several thousands of people here, sending them back, feeding them, figuring out transportation from the from the places they were staying to the actual performance values, it was a huge logistical feat, and we nailed it, right? And my wife came up with the name TAC, and all my team members did not like it at the time that we named it, but I was like, you guys will settle into it. Yeah, but yeah, I love it. So that's TAC. Danfo is more like popular. You guys know Danfo, right? You see the type everywhere. But the mission with Danfo was to really like break the type out of like what you guys recognize Danfo for, which is type and local transportation. What can you use that typography for, separate from slapping it on buses, right? So if you look at some of the earlier slides, you see how we're using Danfo on like on packaging, on chocolate packaging. That is possible because the type is now available in a format that you can use, right? So that's kind of like the point of making Danfo. Okay, so pre-design. How many fonts do you guys think exist in the world? Like, give me like a random number. Like, how many fonts do you think exist? You said? I'm not going to answer it because you're correct or you're closer. I want this to be interesting, so I'm going to ignore you. You said 2 million. Okay. How many fonts do you think exist? 500 million. That's a lot. There are roughly about a little over 1 million fonts in the world. And 1 million fonts is a lot. Like, it might seem small, but like that's like several hours, several years and years and years of development, design and development, right? And usually there are 4 questions you want to ask yourself and answer when you're working on a typeface or when you want to start a typeface, right? The first question is it a personal project or is it a commission? So is it a personal project or is it a commission, right? You guys know the difference between a personal project and a commission. So TAC and Danfo started off as personal projects. They took it. TAC and Danfo started off as personal projects. So I was by myself figuring out how to make them, right? And then Google hired us to properly make them, right? So that's like a weird mix where a personal project becomes a commission. Sometimes personal projects are just personal projects. Like you build them, you sell them. People that like them buy them. People that don't. Commissions are very specific to the people commissioning. So BBC Ray, which is a sans serif built for the BBC, is a commission. I can't remember the studio that actually designed BBC Ray. They'll figure it out. So personal project or commission, right? You guys know Inter, the typeface Inter. So Rasmus, who's the designer of Inter, has been working on Inter for 9 years. So like, you get like, that's obviously a personal project. Spotify Mix that I spoke about earlier, you guys can hear me. Do I need to shout? I don't. Spotify Mix took 18 months. So that's a year and 6 months, right? So a year and a half, essentially. And Danfo took 4 months. Like if we split the development time, because we spent roughly about 7 to 8 months on it, but we're building 2 typefaces at once. People at Google wanted to kill us. TAC and Danfo at once. Like, that's concurrently, right? At the same time. Yeah, my English is failing me. Yeah, so Danfo 4 months, and now it's where Dabi. Project or commission, right? Okay, so when you've answered that, next question is what kind of reading, right? So how will people read the font? That's the second question, right? Is it going to be printed continuous text? Is it going to be headings? Is it going to be short articles? Is it a dictionary? Is it a Bible? And these things matter because I've seen people use Danfo to write like bodies of text. You are a criminal. I mean, you can do it, but like, because the font won't fight you. But Danfo and TAC are display typefaces. You guys know what display typefaces are? So they are primarily, there are several more, but they are text and display typefaces. Text typefaces are usually like the smaller typefaces you see. They are very hard to design, require a lot of design knowledge, take a lot more time, right? Which is why maybe a year or 2 years from now, when I'm skilled enough, I'll attempt a text typeface. But right now, it's just display typefaces, and now they are trying to mess up my shouting. So, Inter, 9 years. Mix, 45 mix, 18 months. Danfo, 4 months. What kind of reading, right? So, printed continuous text, headings, short articles, a dictionary, a Bible, all of these things, they seem similar. You just think that, oh, typefaces, but like they all have very specific requirements, right? So this is Abril titling and Abril text. Titling means a typeface for titles. Text means the variation of the same typeface, but for text. And there's like some tiny details. You see, this yellow line on the top is called X height, right? It's usually the height of the smaller letters. You see how like there is more overshoots in the text version, how the O goes up a little further than this one here, and now the Y goes up a little further. You see how the Y here is a little higher, right? And how this meets the descender line. All of these things are display qualities. The reason why this goes up is so that, the reason why this goes up and the reason why this is a little higher is so that there's more space. So the letters compensate for like, so how do I explain this? I'll go into that detail later. I don't want to spoil the sequence for you. But essentially, these modifications make this more readable in smaller scale. They make this function better when they are tiny. You can do all of this extra like flourish and like extra. You see that the stress, the contrast type. So you're having thinner. You see this O? It's a little thinner here, but it's thicker here. The reason why they can do this is because you appreciate details like that when it's big. When it's small, those things won't print well. Those things disappear. Like, so you need thicker details so that you see those details at small size, right? So these are like, you can't be a type designer if you're not meticulous. You need to learn to work, print, look at the work over and over and over and over and over, tweak really small details, pixel by pixel, until you arrive at something that works, right? So it's like, it takes a long time. The third question is, where will it be used? Which I kind of answered in the second question. So most of the books you know are usually made with 3 typefaces, 3 weights. Books are usually made in book or regular, italic, and then small capitals. Usually when you have those 3 weights, you can design a beautiful book, right? And then, but like when you look at like magazines as a use case, magazines have a huge typographical challenge, right? Because you need headings, you need subheadings, you need pull quotes, you need citations, you need a running header, you need body text, you need footnotes, you need photographic credits. So when you look at like some really well-designed printed or even like digital magazines, you're going to see many different typefaces, or you see one typeface with many different like weights and iterations. All of those things are specifically designed to tackle specific problems. And the fourth question is, how will it be reproduced? So this M that I'm showing you, this is Bell Centennial. So Bell Centennial, one sec. Bell Centennial was designed for AT&T. You guys know AT&T? Was designed for AT&T in 1970 and by Matthew Carter. So when he designed this typeface, he designed it for use in telephone books. You guys know what telephone books are? I'm not that old. I'm laughing because like it makes me like feel cool or whatever. But like telephone books are like really small books that like have like directories, like numbers of like places that you can call, right? And usually those telephone books were printed in large like quantities, very large quantities. What does large quantity means? A large quantity means cheaper paper. A large quantity means quick prints, fast prints, right? How do you optimize type for those situations? They had Bell Centennial had ink traps. So you see this thing that you guys know Figma's old font. You guys know Figma, right? You know they had like white fonts that had like very like aggressive ink traps. That is like a digital manifestation of this idea. These ink traps actually functioned as ink traps. So they actually trapped ink in the sense that when the letters are printed, because of how poor the paper is, right, the ink will print but then settle. Like it prints but then it settles because the paper is bad, right? So those ink traps, they trap the ink. So the M ends up looking like a normal M when it's printed. But on the screen, you have to design it with ink traps. So you guys understand, like, you understand how powerful type is, like, and like what it can mean and how it can be used in design process. So design proper. So I cannot go into like the details of design. So I'm just going to talk about general principles that you can consider when you look at type design or when you're trying to design type. The first thing is called reading. Am I shouting to the guys wearing the headphones? Is it too loud or is good? Okay. Reading is when you look at letters, can you see like repetition in the letters even though they are different? Right? So this is M-I-N-I-M-U-M. These are 4 letters, I think, M-I-N-U. But you can see that the letters share a lot of similar qualities. They look like siblings, even though they are different. So that is reading. Reading is you look at the letters and you see a dance between the forms that informs like that collective look. Doctors. So doctors is every typeface you've seen has the idea of a doctor. So a doctor is the tool you use to make the typeface. If I put paint on my phone and I try to draw letters, my phone, the tip of my phone becomes the doctor's. Meaning, as I'm writing with my phone, the tip of my phone, it's going to reveal certain visual qualities that are specific to the tool, right? For tack, the tool is a flat-nipped pen. So like you carry like a pen that has like a horizontal thin tip, and you're just using it, you dip it in ink, and you're using it to draw. That's why it starts off flat and ends flat. That's why when you draw a curve, your pen doesn't shift, it's straight and just goes like this. That's why it looks like that. So that's the principle of a doctor's. Any typeface you have or any typeface you love has some doctor's principle, right? It means that there's some tool or some methodology to how the tool works that you see in the typeface. Third thing is speed of stroke, right? All of these things are elements of calligraphy, by the way, and I should have addressed that, but I'm not looking at my notes because I like risk. So let me talk about calligraphy very briefly. So no, it's cool. So calligraphy is the art of writing beautifully. So you carry a pen and then you write. That's what calligraphy is, right? Almost every typeface you know is rooted somehow in calligraphy. It's not as that. I mean, some typefaces like Zappino are very obviously linked, but every other typeface kind of borrows on the principles of calligraphy. That's why if you go to type design school, your first few semesters or first few classes are going to be you holding pens and drawing. You're not going to be on the computer or handling like FontLab or Glyphs, which are the apps used to design fonts, by the way, if you didn't know. So speed of stroke. If you are writing really slowly, there is a way your strokes will look versus if you write really fast. Veloz is obviously designed to look like a fast typeface. So you see how the V settles, then that V travels, then the E looks like the type designer did not spend time. It was just like whatever comes out, right? And you see it in the L, you see it in the O, you see it in the S. This is another principle. Fourth principle is formal coherence. So it's a little bit, it feels like reading a little bit, but this is more deliberate in the sense that you're going to look at certain typefaces and you see elements that repeat. There might be small modifications, but those elements are essentially the same elements. Like you see this A, you see this N, that's the same bottom serif, pretty much. You see this C, you see the difference between this thick area and this thin area is the same thing between the difference between that thick area and the Q and the thin area. You see this detail here in the bowl of the O is the same detail in the bowl of the Q, right? So every typeface that you look at, you're not going to have letters that look very different. There are letters that look like elements, like components have been repeated in those letters. Usually those components are adjusted even further, but usually those components form the base of those letters. Counter consistency. So letters are not, I know a lot of people think typography is the black thing you draw. So this B and this C, even though they are different letters, you can see that the internal spaces feel similar. It doesn't need to be mathematically perfect, right? But you can say that this plus this might give you this. Do you understand? It's this idea that you need to bear in mind as you're drawing your letters. Always ensure that the internal and external spaces, right, are consistent. The internal spaces specifically are consistent. Sketching. So there are different ways to sketch typefaces. Remember what I said, I'm speaking very broadly, right? All of these things I've spoken about, there's like 10 more. So if you're really interested in principles, you need to dig deep, right? When you want to draw letters, when you're trying to like create typefaces, there are usually about 3 ways to go about it to sketch with pencils. The first one is a feeling sketch. So you have an idea of what the form looks like, and then you hatch, right? You hatch what you feel that form would look like. This is good if you have an idea of what the volume of the form looks like. You guys know what I mean by volume. So like if you know how much space, you know how heavy. So if you are drawing like a light font versus a bold font, the bold variation, you know how bold it would be, right? So you can begin to sketch. This will not serve you if you want to understand the outlines of the font. This is only good for volume, right? If you want to understand outlines, you can adopt feeling sketch or double pencil. So the double pencil is you literally use like a rubber band to tie 2 pencils together and you just draw with them at the same time. And what you find is that the 2 pencils kind of act like a broad nib pen, and then they help you like figure out like forms and how things would follow, right? And that's what I use here, right? Feeling sketch is usually you can draw the outline, then shade it in, or you can shade, then outline, right? So digitization. You guys know what Bezier nodes are. You guys are familiar with Illustrator, right? You know Bezier nodes, right? The Bezier nodes on glyphs are on steroids. They're like, so Bezier nodes were created in the 1960s as a way to do, I think it was automobile or aeronautical drawings, right? But essentially, Bezier nodes are the meeting point between code and drawing. So that's why when you draw on Illustrator, your vectors are scalable on the web. That's because, I hope I'm not saying rubbish, but it makes sense in my head. That's because your drawings are being instantly converted to code because your drawings are based on mathematics, right? So Bezier nodes on Illustrator, just imagine like the nodes on Illustrator, but like 50 times more like sensitive. Like you can hit like many more points. You can be more sensitive with like the curves. There are many people that when they draw logos in Illustrator, they go to glyphs to redraw the logo just because glyphs gives them a very high level of fidelity, right? When you look at this letter, I feel like I jumped one. Okay. There's a slide missing. There are 3, when you look at this letter is made up of 3 types of nodes, right? So there is the curve meeting curve, straight meeting straight, right? And curve meeting straight. I'll explain that in a bit. You guys know what I mean if you use Illustrator. It's just more like, this is just theory, right? So usually in an app like Glyphs, right? So there are many apps you can use to design fonts. There's Glyphs, there's Font Lab. Those are the only 2 that come to mind. And then there are some others that are trying to do what Figma is doing, which is like building fonts like on the web. So collaboration is better. No, it's cool. I'm good. Thank you. And depending on the software, these nodes might mean different things. But I use Glyphs. Glyphs is specific to just Mac. If you're trying to build on PC, you can use Font Lab, right? Or any of the other apps. But Glyphs is lauded as like the app for building typefaces, right? This is a curve meeting a straight. This is I don't know if this is a curve meeting a curve. These and these are different. This circle is intentional. I'll explain what this means in a bit. This is a straight meeting a straight. So square, square, straight. Circle, curve, curve. Circle can be straight, curve. I cannot explain this in detail. This is very practical. Like you actually need to go into the app and play around with like the actual tools to really understand how this works. But this is key to weight or typefaces and rendering, quality of rendering. The more points you have in a letter, the heavier the typeface. It's the reason why when you see like typefaces that are designed to look like grunge, they're usually heavier because they contain more nodes, more points. But if you see like a really geometric typeface, it's incredibly light, kilobytes even, because fewer nodes, right? So they will teach you at type design school that you need to master nodes. So you make light files because you don't want to be sending heavy files. It's just expensive, right? This triangle facing the right and this one facing the left, that's intentional because those symbols, they close the shape. So these triangles are what is stopping this from looking like outlines. That is what is those shapes are what is changing this from two lines, that is one line and another line, to a filled shape. If these triangles face the same direction, you're just going to have outlines, right? That's how glyphs works, right? So that's what that node means. So in digital construction, right, there are, and in type design, there are different, type design is, I feel like I should explain M space, but I'm worried that might be too technical. You guys can handle some technicality now. Okay, cool. So there is, imagine a square, and the square is split into 1,000 squares. So one square with like a grid of 1,000 smaller squares. That's called a UPM. I don't know what UPM means. I'm learning too. I'm sorry. But that's called a UPM. It's usually called an M space. When you're designing a font, you have to specify your UPM because the UPM determines how detailed your points will get, because your tool can settle on each grid point, each intersection. So when you see very detailed fonts, they have very high UPMs. They can have UPMs of like 4,000 because like you really need to like, it's like almost spiritual at that point. Like you cannot let Illustrator or let glyphs to be saying, no, this point must fall here. It has to fall where you need it to fall. And you need thank you. And you need an intersection for it to fall there, right? So you need more intersections. So a denser grid, right? And each grid, 1,000, the most common grid is 1,000. When you see like type design and you see like these numbers on the lines, those numbers are usually if you add those numbers, you usually get 1,000. Usually, right? What I'm basically saying is that from here to here is 1,000. I'm exaggerating, it should be like from here to like here is 1,000, right? The baseline is 0. You would expect the baseline to be like the bottom of the square, right? But for some reason, type designers like to just flex that they're smart and they understand maths. So the baseline is at the bottom of the letter for some reason. That's here, right? Then you count in negative to the descender. So this is 0, but that's minus 200. So if you add 200 plus 0 plus this plus this plus this, ideally what you will get is something around 1,000, right? So this is ascender height. So ascender height is your lowercase letters, the ascenders. You guys know what ascenders are. So your H, your L, right? Ascenders. Cap height, your capital letters, the absolute height of your capital letters. Baseline, where your letters sit. Descender, where your descenders meet, right? There is, so if you are designing accented letters, so accented letters are those letters in Ami, like Yoruba and like other languages, right? Accented letters, I don't know if there's no standard line for accented letters because accents are very dependent on the typeface. It depends on how the typeface looks, right? But you need to be careful that accented letters don't exceed 1,000. Because what happens when your accented letters exceed 1,000? You have clashing. That's why you see some typefaces, line to line, default leading. You guys remember what leading is? Default leading, and you start to see the base of the letter clashing with the accents. It's because something is amiss in the 1,000 calculation, right? How to start? There are basic forms in type. It's graphic design, right? There's the square, there's the circle, and there's the triangle. Optical, you guys know what optical or compensation means? You guys know what optical compensation means? So like when you're designing, when you put a square and a circle and a triangle of the same size, you want to increase the size of the... Now wow, you people waste my time, then you now give me time to... I'll try. No. The circles need to be a little larger than the square so they look the same. Because if you make this circle the same size as the square, it's going to look smaller. Optical compensations. And let me, if you don't love this thing, type is full of it. Like the things you think look alike, geometric, they are optically compensated. You guys know Futura, the typeface. People say it's the most geometric font in the world. This circle is not made of two geometric circles. They are ovals because they're optically adjusted, right? So like this is something that is everywhere in type design. This is NOV. So you see the N as an overshoot. But you see how those basic forms can dictate, like, it's important to start with those forms because you kind of understand what your square forms, what your horizontals will look like. So your left and right straights, your left and right curves, that's the O, and your left and right diagonals. Almost every letter in the Latin alphabet mirrors this somehow. You find those qualities, straight to straight, straight to curved, diagonal to straight, diagonal to curved. Those things repeat in type. So optical compensation, where the O's experience some overshoots, but when you're creating heavy O's, you cannot make the heavy O's the same. You can't just increase the size of this or taking this on both ends. So it's not like if you have a 1 pixel stroke, you can't just make it a 3 pixel stroke. That's not how it works, right? Usually you want to make the O a little smaller so that it feels consistent with the lighter O. There is a principle in type design called color. So color is when you look at a body of type, if you squint your eye, it looks, when the type looks blurry, does it look like a uniform gray? Do you guys understand what I mean? So like if you squint your eye and you're seeing like dark patches, like one place is like really dark and one part is light and one part is dark, the type has bad color, right? All these optical compensations ensure that the typeface that you're designing has consistent color. The best typefaces you know, when you squint your eyes, you see an even gray, right? When you see them in body formats, in huge wads of text, you see an even gray. Another kind of optical compensation, horizontals versus verticals. I love this one so much. You see this E? In this E, the horizontal thickness and the vertical thickness are the same. That's a no-no. Horizontals always feel heavier than verticals when they are the same. So your horizontals always need to be lighter. Always. Right? So you see that this is it's not slightly, it's significantly lighter than this. That is the only way the horizontals and the verticals will look like they're in unison. If you make them the same, too heavy. Even in the heaviest fonts, the horizontals are always lighter. Also, you see the base. You see how this base extends? In the letter E, that's another optical compensation. You need there's like a principle of physics. Sorry to people who are not science students here, but you need the letter to look like it can sit physically, like in the real world. It can't look like it's going to tip over or it can't carry the forms on top of it. So usually the base, the bottom, go and check like the E's of your favorite font. The base horizontal stab is usually wider and the top one is usually thinner, slightly inward than that one. It's a very small detail, but like if you study type is just full of all of these like tiny adjustments. You see this R? There is a consistent thickness between this and this. So you have like this huge black spot here. It just looks like dark. It's called dark within the context of like color, right? Usually when junctions meet in type design, you want to make them thin out where they meet. So they can start thick, but as they come together, just so it feels consistent, they become thinner. Because when they meet, they feel heavy, right? So you don't want it's going to feel heavier than the rest if they meet at with the same thickness, right? Sorry. Okay. Principle of, I'm storming you guys, right? I'm giving you guys like a shit ton of like, I hope this guy's sleeping. I hope you guys take something away from this. So there's a principle called derivative construction. Remember how I spoke about rhythm earlier and the modular detail that I spoke about earlier? Usually, if you look at letters, this is just like an expansion of that. You see everything that's labeled 1 is pretty much the same shape, right? So 1, 1, 1, just longer. 1, just longer. 1, just going down. 1 down. 1, 1, 1, 1. Same shape. 2, straight, then widens. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, flipped. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Same shape. 3, it's like 2, but like just longer, right? I should have just made it 2. But this, that, and that. 4, the shape of the bowl, right? So it just repeats itself. Repeats, 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 repeats. 5, the diagonal. So not quite straight, but like slightly slanted, right? Here and here. And then 6, in every typeface, there will be some shapes that are just stubborn. That they're like greedy. They're like, this one is just for me, I'm not sharing. You understand? And that happens all the time, right? So that's an example. You see that every other thing, all the other ones that taper, they taper out. But the F is so like, has mad, you know, main character syndrome. It's like me, I'm going to be inward. So that's why he's a separate shape. Uppercase and lowercase have relationships. When you design a lowercase letter, usually, TAC is an exemption, and I'll explain. Usually, the uppercase letters are, they have, well, no, actually, TAC is not an exemption. Usually, the uppercase letters have thicker stems. So the stem is the shape that forms like the structure of the font, right? They have thicker stems because, why? If you look at it within the principle of space, the space they occupy, they take more space, right? So if you have more space and you maintain the same stem, the letter looks light, right? Type design is really just like playing around with like spaces and proportions. You're just designing one graphic, designing another graphic, and trying to make those two graphics feel like they look good together. So you see that this is slightly wider by 2 pixels because this entire width is wider than this. This has like this and this here. This side is empty. So you need to compensate for that. And when you're designing type, there are some strings of letters that you use to test type. Because those letters might not be real words. Addition is a real one, hand gloves are real words, but hamburger font sieve isn't. But essentially what they do is, this is decades and decades of testing where they put difficult letters next to each other. And I'll explain how letters sit between each other in a bit. But they put difficult letters next to each other to see how the letters sit, right? And to see how color feels, like how consistent the shapes feel, right? I'm bombarding you guys. I told you it was going to be wide, not deep, right? So it's pretty wide. So what are letters made of? Letters are made of white space and dark space, right? Like I said, some of the best designers in the world are excellent at this, right? And then they use this to fill up this. This is what they're actually designing. I know it sounds like abstract, but the more you read into it, the more you read about it, the more you understand what I'm saying. So there's the counter space, there's the exterior shape, and then those things combine together, push each other to form the letter. There's also something called a glyph space. So remember when I spoke about leading, this is how letters used to be cast in lead. You have the letter protruding, and then all these other things would be recessed, right? This is line space, or what constitutes leading. You can hear something else. This is fitting. This is counter space. This is the letter. So fitting is, there are two, when you're spacing letters, you know how I've been speaking about spaces, how letters are made of spaces, right? The spaces outside of the letters and the spaces within the letters. Now, it's very important to fit letters before you ken them. You guys know what kenning is. Kenning is when you take a letter and you take another letter, and you're trying to like figure out a sweet spot between those letters, right? Something that I learned the hard way, and something that's extremely time consuming, is kenning before you fit. You need to make sure that each letter is proportional, interior and exterior, by itself. Each letter, before you figure out how letters combine. Because if you tempt yourself and you start to adjust spaces without resolving the letters, what you're going to end up with is revision upon revision upon revision, right? And I'll explain in a bit. So this is letter space, right, between E and Z. What good fitting does is it forms like a kind of magnet between two letters. Those two letters look good together because they've been fitted properly, right? And usually when you want to When you now eventually want to kern, you kern in threes. You don't kern, you can't kern Fireboy at once. You want to kern FIR, make sure F, and this, I'm going to explain this slide because some of you will disagree with the things that you're saying. You want to make sure that I sits in the middle of F and R, not mathematically, optically. R sits between I and E sits between B sits, E sits between R and B between E and O between B and Y. Now this slide, I love this slide so much because you can look at some of these combinations and argue that some of the letters are not centered. But like I said, it's push and pull. This I looks closer to this F. Why? Why do you think the I looks closer to F? Exactly, because F has space. R is a solid straight line, so there's nothing choking. But that F, this space, you need to compensate for it. How do you compensate for it? You shift I closer to F. The E was a very difficult character. It should be tighter than this. And I agree that it should be tighter, but it just didn't look good. So like I just stuck with it. Y and F kind of function the same way. But that's basically the principle of fitting and kerning, right? So in type design, there are letters called control characters. You guys know Ono. You know I showed you Ono in the beginning. Ono, the letters that make the name of the foundry are control characters. People that engage Ono as non-designers don't know that, but O, H, and N are control characters. So when type designers like engage Ono, they're like, these people are like super smart, like that's very clever, right? And also, oh no, because they are like opposite of like commercial type. Like they want to do typefaces that are like, why did you make this, right? That's what their aim is. So in type design, there are control characters, and control characters are characters that you use to design other characters, right? H and O are control characters. H because vertical, vertical. O because curved, curved. It gives you a good understanding of how to space properly. So you see this H and this H, 88. You see this O and this O, 88. You see the O feels wider than the H. You see it feels loose. That's where, what principle is that? That's fitting and kerning, right? You see how the O looks better now that it's been reduced by 30 plus points, right? N and O, lowercase, right? Some people use H, some people use N. Yeah, but it's pretty much the same. Something that is super important as you're making type, right, is type designers are not good for the environment because you will print. There are certain things that your type design is geometrical knowledge, that is, you know, observing the mathematics, being aware of the numbers, but it's also a lot with your eye. Like you really need to gauge things with your eye, right? And for you to do that, the screen can be deceptive. So you need to print a lot. I must have used like maybe like 1,000 sheets of paper for TAC. Because you design, you print, you look at it, you look away, you come back, you adjust, you move things 1 pixel, you move another thing 1 pixel, and I'll get to how you can, what that process should be like. But essentially, you're going to print a lot, right? So just get a laser printer. Usually, type designers prefer laser printers to inkjets, because laser printers, for the same reason, Centennial Bell, right? Laser printers work with ink, liquid ink. So if you're designing and you're printing, if the printer is not good, you have like, you're not going to get those forms. Laser printers use powder, I think. So they just spit the powder at the paper. So it's like, it's more accurate. You're going to get sharper edges. So print, right? And when you figured out your control characters, when you figured out the spacing, right? And you have like good reading between the letters, you now pick each letter and you place it between the control characters. And then you print. And then you adjust. And then you print. And you do that for uppercase and for lowercase. There are some typefaces you see that look amazing. And it is because those type designers understand how to space and fit, separate from drawing the letters. You're going to print. Print. Right? Okay. So we're almost done. Kerning. So this is tack before kerning. It looks kind of kerned. Like if you're not looking at it with too much attention, some of these combinations look good, right? Some of them, not all of them. right? So you can say like this CDE, for instance, that could pass, right? This FGH could pass, but this is good fitting. Like we spent so much time fitting each character that kenning was the last thing you did to just like last mile, right? And there are some letters that are very difficult. No matter how well you fit, you need to ken them. Like H and O, you can fit, but A and V, letter A and V, or T and V, because T has lots of space under and V is like this. You might need to shift it so V looks like it's, you understand what I mean? So some letters are just difficult and you have to ken them, fitting can't solve them. And this is horrible. I should have shown this without the green so you actually see how good kenning looks. But I illustrated this so you see how like tailored the spacing is. Almost no value here is the same, and that's intentional, right? Because you are fitting and you are kenning. Print, right? Finally, licensing. So we've handled drawing and all of that, right? So for licensing, usually there are about 3 questions that matter when you want to license your font. You've made your font, it looks great. You spaced, you've kenned, right? You've been playing with it, you've sent it to your friends. Your friends have typed with it, they sent you feedback. You've made adjustments, right? So now you want to sell your font, or you want to put it on the internet and engage in some way, right, with the public, commercially or non-commercially. So when licensing a font, right, the 3 questions, I'm almost done, last slide. How many computers can the font be installed on, right? So when you try to, in your days of that font, are like, you know, I use that font, God, I scarred that font, right? In your days of that font, and like even Google fonts, like the free typefaces, right? Google Fonts has an OFL, so it's Open Font License. An Open Font License means you can go on GitHub, download TAC. If you are good enough and you're sound enough in your type design knowledge, you can make adjustments, push them, and if Google thinks, oh, that makes sense, that letter looks better, they'll push your updates. So that's an open license. An open license kind of means that anyone can edit it. It means that anyone can download it. It means it's there for free. You can use it commercially, you can use it not commercially, right? And that is like it's a partial answer to my first question, which is how many computers can the font be installed on? Because you can install an OFL font on, if you like, you have 50 PCs installed on all PCs. Some commercial licenses will say, if you are working at UDC's venue, you can install the font on 10 computers here. If you step outside here, you have to buy a new license. It's a lot of work. Type design is a lot. You guys love Inter. He's been working on it for 9 years. It's a lot of work, a lot of meticulous work, right? You know, so like it's a lot of work. So like type designers try to equate the value in terms of licensing, and some studios are very loose. Some are incredibly like. Let me give you a small example. When we designed the brand identity for CarryWise in my past life, it's not so long ago. We used BR FEMA. We bought it from Monotype. We got it from I can't remember the place we got it from, but we got the license, commercial license. We were good, right? When Monotype acquired the foundry that we bought BR FEMA from, they sent a 40K bill to CarryWise because the licensing terms had changed, right? No, dollars. The licensing terms had changed, right? So licensing is something you have to be cautious about. If you're designing for a brand, if you don't like to read, just have a legal person in your team that can do the reading, because it's so important. When we designed for Rise, right, we bought Tomato Grotesque, right? And we bought it for a specific number of instances for the app. The moment it exceeded it, some of these type designers they are geeks, like super sound engineers and developers. The moment it exceeded it, they had a way to count on their end how many phones it had been installed on. The moment it exceeded it, they sent a message to Rise straight that, okay, more than 25,000 times, you need a new license. You need a 50K license, right? You need a 50,000 user license. Some foundries are like lax. They're like, okay, you paid us, you bought it. It's okay, sorry, we won't bother you too much, except maybe we want to meet a certain target or whatever. But some are like eagle eye on their money. They don't joke, right? It's the same way you buy some images, some stock images Also, or you steal one image that's licensed and Shutterstock ignores you. Or and then there are some platforms that, or some photographers, if you use their images, they will find you on the internet and they'll send you an email. The images we use for tax case study, we paid almost $2,000 for 2 images for a 1-year license. After 1 year, I need to pay Marilyn Nance another $2,000 to use them again, or I take them down. And these people have agencies that hound the internet, right, to look for these instances where these things are used. So if you're a type designer, you're not going to be like a billionaire or whatever, but you can get your money if you are disciplined. Second question is, can the user modify the font or not? Open font license, you can. There are some, usually every other license, you can modify the font. If you open the font in glyphs, you are committing a crime. It might not be a criminal offense, but it's a civic offense, meaning you might not do jail time, but you get fined and you pay a lot of money. When a Monotype, I think it was Monotype, when they worked on Helvetica Now, you guys know Helvetica Now, not Helvetica. When they worked on the modified version of Helvetica Now, there was a little bit of dispute between Monotype and Linotype or Adobe, I can't remember, but there was a settlement involved, right? It's crazy. And very fascinating. And the last question is, the last thing to consider is, how does redistribution work? So Google Fonts, you go on Google Fonts, you can download it from anywhere in the world, right? Some foundries, you can only get the font on their website. Some foundries will say, once you've downloaded the font, you need a special license to send it to your printer, if your printer can edit. If you want to send it to your printer, you have to curve it, you have to create outlines. So the printer does not have edit access. Some of these things are things that a lot of Nigerian designers and African designers in general get away with now. But in advanced places where type design is prominent, you will get called. It's because this place is pretty much underdeveloped in that like sense. The ecosystem, type design is relatively new here, right? But once it gets advanced, because there's money to be made, people will sit up and start to do these things for even Nigerian clients, right? That's my last slide. Thank you. Lastly, a lot of the, I just read these books and I basically spat out everything I read in the books in this presentation. I mean, some of the knowledge is like my interpretation, but if you really want to like start with type design, you need to get these 3 books. This book is particularly delightful because it explains the idea of fitting and space in a way that's very easy to digest, almost childlike. And these are like things you need if you want to start designing type, right? You don't need a Mac computer, but like, I'm sorry, I'm one of those people that looks down on PC people. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm better than everyone. You need Gliss app, just because I think it's the best app. Other apps are good. If you're on PC, you can get Fortlab. That's also fine. You need a black and white laser printer. Laser printer explained why. But black and white because color is a distraction, right? You need to be able to access, like, black and white. Lettering, eraser, whiteout, scissors, things you can draw with, things you can erase with. Whiteout is particularly important because sometimes you're using ink. You can't clean ink with an eraser. So use whiteout to just, cover the spaces you don't need. Any kind of sketchbook, tracing paper, very important, because like some of the adjustments are not adjustments that require that you draw the letters all over again. They're just like, oh, just shift this in a little bit. Just use tracing paper. What else can I talk about here? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Some slides are missing, but it's cool. Thank you. Ask UDC. I think UDC. Talk to UDC guys. Thank you.